I literally work myself to the absolute bone.
Benjamin Berry is part of the army of helpers patrolling floodwaters by boat and getting people to safety. But Ben says an even bigger task is now at hand as these communities devastated by floods shift from rescue to recovery mode.
You're cutting power lines to get through. Dead animals everywhere. Nothing can prepare you for that. It had a massive toll on me. And then I just crumbled.
Today on the show, we speak to Benjamin Berry, or as everyone calls him, Benny, a breathwork facilitator and cold immersion guide who found himself in the thick of the Lismore Floods earlier this year, navigating and corresponding the rescue of people stranded in their homes. Benny shares the devastation and the impact the floods had, but also how the community banded together to overcome a once-in-a-lifetime occurrence. We also explain the benefits of breathwork and cold immersion and how you can implement them daily to help alleviate anxiety. So without further ado, let's roll the intro. Welcome to the Betar Project, the podcast helping you build mental fitness. My name is Nick Betar and my mission is to crush the stigma surrounding mental health. Each week we bring you an inspiring person or message which will help you unlock your inner truth to live a life of harmony within mind, body, and spirit. Thank you for spending some time with me today. Let's dive in. Benny, my man, welcome to the podcast. Appreciate you taking some time out of your day to jump on.
Thanks, Nick. I really appreciate being here, mate. Thanks for having me.
I love to start my podcast with a bit of gratitude. So what are 3 things that you're grateful for today?
Oh, that's easy for me, mate. Number 1, my beautiful wife. Number 2, my 2 darling daughters. And number 3 would be my dog, although I think I'm more her human than she's my dog. So,
Oh, God. How old are your daughters?
one's turning 5 this weekend, mate, and another one 2.5.
Bro, they grow so quick. My daughter is turning 6 months old tomorrow. I was like, where has this time gone?
That's a big congratulations to you, brother. That's a hard 6 months, so well done.
I know. And I wanted to ask you, we'll jump into parenthood quickly. What are the biggest lessons you've learnt from being a parent?
Oh, it's just not about me. Nothing's about me. It's honestly about tuning in with them. And now I've got 2. It's made it even more important to tune into them and see what each of them need every day, every week, every month, rather than what I want out of them or where I want them to grow specifically. It's just not about me.
Exactly. And for me, what I've noticed is they bring out your flaws. They bring out areas in your life that you need to work on because basically they're like a reflection of you. They're like a little mirror. And if you're trying to teach them to, eat their vegetables, but you're not eating your vegetables, they're not going to eat it. So they really bring out the flaws in the areas that you need to work on in life.
Yeah, totally, mate. And I think a lot of parents with a couple of kids would be like this, but I've got one who's my mirror and another one who's the mirror of my wife. So it challenges us both and we see where we both need to grow as people and as parents, but that's the beautiful part, hey?
That's it, man. They're the best thing in the world. And the saying is like, you don't know true love until you hold your own flesh and blood. And yeah, it's a different type of love, eh?
Yeah.
I wanted to jump into the work that you're doing. You made a post lately around nervous system nourishment and how that is used to alleviate anxiety and support healthy hormonal responses. Do you mind diving a bit on that and expanding that? Because for me, anxiety is something that I've really struggled with growing up, and now it's only something that I've really tried to work on through breath work, through meditation, through cold immersion. So I want to get your take on that.
Yeah, for sure, mate. So one of the things I am is a Wim Hof Method instructor. And I think the post you're referring to was I just had a little video up on social media just of one of my workshops, people breathing, having a sound bath with crystal bowls, having a deep relaxation, which some people akin to a meditative experience, and then jumping in an ice bath afterwards. Myself as well, I had anxiety, didn't realize that I had it for a long time. I had a professional career in emergency services, And we're basically taught to shove that anxiety into a big box and lock it away, and along with all your emotions and your feelings and all those things that shouldn't be out on a fire ground or at an emergency incident or anything like that. And then I got to a point where those things started to come up, and I did have anxiety, and acknowledging that was really hard. And the thing that really helped me was the Wim Hof Method. I got stuck into that for back pain originally, realized that I was having way more results with my mental health. With back pain, it takes over your whole body. So my mental health was diving at the time. Got myself out of pain. I was able to improve my mental health, and then started learning a lot more about it and what it does for you. And that's kind of why I stuck with it. I could have, said, see you later to the method after I got myself out of pain. That was the goal, but it just opened up a whole lot more for me. And what we're seeing now in the Northern Rivers, 6 months after we've had 2 devastating floods, is that people kind of need that nervous system nourishment at the moment, where even if you're not directly affected by those 2 floods we had, people are just at their wits' end, because we're seeing traumatic experiences everywhere. You can't drive through half of the towns up here without wanting to cry at the things that we still see 6 months later. And people still need to go about their lives and go to work and play soccer on the weekend and whatnot. But we're doing that in amongst utter devastation. So it's kind of unprecedented for us up here. Anyway, it's a new way of living, that's for sure.
I wanted to ask, on a physiological level, like how does cold immersion, how does breathwork actually help us into alleviating anxiety? Like what actually is happening within the body?
That's a big question, mate. I could take an hour easily just to explain that. But in a nutshell for you, breathwork first. What the Wim Hof Method in particular does is, in my workshop, we go quite deep in the breathwork. If you're sitting at home, you might do 3 rounds of the breathwork, and you get all of the physiological benefit in those 3 rounds. And that's really all you need. But when we come together in a group, I like to go a bit deeper. We have the group energy. Quite often I have a musician there. And what happens is we see that conscious brain, that thinking brain, start to slow down until it almost switches off completely. And we just have our feelings and our emotions and that deeper part of your consciousness come through. The way I like to explain it is, we all know what flow state for an elite athlete is, when they've done their 10,000 hours of training, or they have innate talent that they're born with, and they get into that flow state. But this is kind of flow state for living. We just have those thoughts out of the way, and we just experience being. It's a really beautiful moment that we have. And then after that, some people feel like the whole world's lifted off their shoulders. You can't really have a bad day after you experience that. And then we go into the ice bath afterwards. And the ice bath it's before the breath work, it's kind of this sexy challenge that people really want to do and push themselves and throw it on the Instagram page. And that's really cool. But once you've done the breath work, it kind of loses that sexiness. It becomes this kind of your body versus the elements, and people get so zoned in, and they jump in there and they get all the physiological benefit, which again is great. But you get this dopamine hit as well, which we're just used to dopamine hits, artificially at the moment, scrolling our phone and looking for likes and comments and whatnot. But that dopamine hit can last a few hours after we get out of the ice, and you just have this general increase of your well-being. And again, you definitely can't have a bad day after you get out of the ice. Definitely
agree. Growing up, coming from a rugby league background, I used to hate ice baths because they used to make us do it after sessions or after games. And it's just like, it was all about just recovery for the body. I never knew it had the benefits of the mind. I just fucking hated it until I learned a lot about it. I was like, wow, okay, this actually helps in alleviating stress. That dopamine hit, as you said, and just feeling really relaxed, and press that reset button. And now I don't do a lot of ice baths per se, but I do cold showers. Every day I have a cold shower, and yes, I get the benefits off the back of that, but it's the challenge within itself to actually hop in the cold shower, especially in the middle of winter. You do not want to be doing that. But I know if I can do that cold shower, well, I can really accomplish anything I want throughout that day, because I've just overcome that one obstacle.
Totally, mate. Half of it is about doing something hard. Yeah. Having something hard, forcing yourself to doing it and accomplishing that. You get that mental benefit just from the act of doing that as well. And cold showers, that's pretty hard. Pretty hard in winter. We have cold water.
I know. It's, it's fucking cold. Even though it's like a minute or 2 minutes, it feels like 10 minutes. It's bloody freezing. I wanted to ask, so we're talking about breathwork, cold immersion. How do we utilize our oxygen to get more out of it, especially when it comes to the cold exposure and using our breath to make our bodies more oxygenated?
Yeah, so mate, in a nutshell again, with the Wim Hof Method, the way I explain it is that it's an acute breathing method. So it's something we only want to use for a short period of the day. And breathing functionally, how we want to breathe all day, every day, is a whole different kettle of fish, right? Like different physiology behind it, different functionality behind it. We actually want to be more tolerant of CO2 every day. We want to nasal breathe only. There's a whole heap of things that we want to stick to. With the Wim Hof Method, we kind of do the exact opposite for a tiny period of the day, maybe 15 minutes, 20 minutes if you can. And we flip it on its head. We fill up our bodies with oxygen and we get rid of as much CO2 as possible. And what that does is it's kind of like a gym for our inner body, right? We go to the gym and we do something for an hour a day and put our body under stress and change the environment for our body. And we build strength from that and we grow from that. Same with this method as well. We just flip everyday breathing, functional breathing on its head. We fill up on oxygen. We change the environment of our body. We go alkaline for a period of time. Our body has this time for deep rest. We change a whole heap of other things in our body. One of the biggest things is the anti-inflammation properties of this breath work in particular. That's something that's been studied a lot. Yeah, so it's just about kind of flipping that on its head for 20 minutes, reaping the benefits of that for the next couple of hours or maybe a day if you've been practicing for a long time, and then go back into your functional breathing patterns.
So essentially, it's like shocking the system. And with cold immersion, I could be wrong, could be correct, but when we do it, all the blood kind of goes to our organs and then gets oxygenated. And then once we hop out, it goes back to the rest of our body. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's just the shunting effect. So when you get into anything cold, really, the skin receptors send information to the brain and says it's too cold to sustain life. So we send all of the blood back to our core. We restrict the cardiovascular system. That's an automatic response. All the blood comes back to the core and the brain to keep us alive, because we need those a lot more than we need our limbs. And then once we get out, after a few minutes, the skin receptors send information back to the brain and says, hey, we're not under attack anymore. We're back to ambient temperature. And then it opens up again. And so that's a bit of a strong workout for the cardiovascular system, and it's building strength as well. But to come back to your body's homeostasis after the cold, if you do it naturally, if you give yourself time to do it naturally, that's what really strengthens and builds the immune system too.
And would you recommend people incorporating this in their day-to-day life, like 20 or 30 minutes a day of breath work and some cold immersion?
Definitely, mate. Definitely. I see it so often, people just being blown away at the workshops I do. And that's nothing that, I'm not blowing smoke up my own ass. It's tools that have been around for millennia. We're just kind of using them under something called the Wim Hof Method now. But when people stick with it, man, the results are incredible.
Yeah, I push all the listeners now, just try for yourself. Like, yes, we're talking about it here, we're talking about all the benefits, but you're not going to know unless you go try it. So do a bit of breath work, do a bit of cold immersion, and just really test it out for yourself. Do you incorporate this kind of stuff with your children?
Not yet. My eldest daughter knows when I'm breathing. My youngest daughter couldn't care less. She just heads off and plays or whatever. My eldest daughter knows when I'm breathing, and she'll peek her head in or copy a few breaths. But something that was cool over last summer, so she was about 4.5 then, having an ice bath. She'd come down with me during the day. I've got a freezer in our shed, and she'd play with the ice, and she actually got my wetsuit bucket out and filled it with water from the tap and put some ice chunks in there and had her own little ice bath. So I'm hoping, mate, she'll be 5.5 this summer. So when it's a bit warmer, I'll start to get her in that too.
Yeah, I think it's so important to get children involved in this stuff very early. because the benefits off the back of it, if they can learn to regulate their body, regulate their breath when it comes to stressful situations, they're going to be able to handle it a lot better.
Yeah, totally. And just bringing it back to what you mentioned at the start, how they're our mirrors. If our daughters see us bettering ourselves in all aspects of life, they're going to grow up thinking that's normal, which you can't ask for much more than that.
I want to go back a bit. So you got a background in, a lifeguard, firefighting, underground rescue team leader. How did you find yourself getting into all that?
Originally, yeah, lifeguarding, I just enjoyed the ocean. I surfed, I spearfished. It was just kind of natural progression. Found myself in Western Australia, and a lot of those skills that I had, especially cool skills, transferred into underground search and rescue for the resources industry over there. And I found myself, working down a hole for 12 hours a day sometimes, working up to a kilometer underground in all these weird environments, and wasn't the way I wanted to spend my career, but also not many people can say that they worked in a hole for a few years of their life either. So that was interesting. And then I moved into firefighting full time after that. Again, just kind of natural progression from that. That was a bit more sustainable. I spent a few more years doing that. And here I am now teaching something that's worked for me and that I love.
How did you go about making the transition? Because very totally different areas of line of work. Like, how do you go from underground rescue firefighter to now breathwork instructor?
Yeah, so I had a bit of a transition period in there. I left firefighting about 5 years ago now, and since then, I've been managing a small team. We respond to emergencies on the state highways in New South Wales. It's all logistics. A lot of us have background in emergency services. So that was kind of the transition from the field to the operations center. But in all of these positions I've had, I suppose the hardest part about what I do now was my fear of presenting. I just had a fear of public speaking, and I had a lot of time to work on it because half of what you do in emergency services is prepare rather than respond. So a lot of the preparation involves going to a site, meeting with work groups, meeting with locals, presenting to them an emergency evacuation plan or running a drill with them. And I started to practice the Wim Hof Method, had my own workshops, and I just felt like it was something that I'd just have on the side, and I really enjoyed it. And that's just grown, and it's grown to the point where, this is what I do now. And it doesn't seem like natural progression from that, but I suppose I use a lot of those tools that I teach now in the professions that I had, that they got me through some really hard times.
And what are some of those tools that transitioned over into what you do now?
Yeah, so with the Wim Hof Method, specifically the breathwork, I run workshops where I integrate that method as well as parts of other breathwork techniques that I've used, particularly around that anxiety piece rather than the physiology piece. So I started dabbling in breathwork from a young age, like 16, when I was surfing and spearfishing, trying to increase breath hold, build up my tolerance of CO2. Went into practices for meditation gain, I suppose, with sleep. So I was working shift work for about 10 years of my life. So trying to work on practices to help me sleep with different breath works, and then found the Wim Hof Method. So I integrate quite a lot of those into the workshop as well. It's not, I don't just focus on the Wim Hof Method. And I think that's a benefit as well, that rather than just having this acute 20-minute practice that I can give people, I've actually got tools that they can use all day, every day.
Yeah, it's awesome that they can come to this event, they can do the breathwork, they can do the cold immersion, but they can leave with tools that they can implement on day-to-day basis. So when that anxiety may arise in their life, they can implement that.
Yeah, that's the most important thing, mate. That you can use every day.
It's crazy, man. And I want to touch on, so you do, is it the Conscious Club on every Friday, and then you do your Breath and Ice with Benny, which is your actual events that you do every few weeks or a few months?
Yeah, so the Breath and Ice with Benny is the group workshop. I have one every month or so. And I do in between that, I do a lot of private sessions as well. And anyone who's done a workshop, whether it's a group workshop or a private or at a gym or whatever, once they've done that, they can come to the Conscious Club. And man, the Conscious Club is my favorite time of week. It's early, it's 6 till 7 a.m., just at a little community hall up here. And we don't do any of the talking. It's just guided breath work, straight into the ice bath. There's a cafe across the road. We have a coffee afterwards, have a couple of hugs, have a chat, and go on your way. And it just feels like the best way to kick off the weekend.
Mate, if I'm ever up in your area, I'll have to come check it out for sure.
Love to have you along, mate.
I want to jump into the floods that happened recently. How did you find yourself getting involved with it? Was it just your background? You're like, okay, I have this experience. I feel like I can help.
Yeah, I actually had no idea how bad it was on the day that it hit. I keep an eye on the weather, just I suppose from my background, but we live on a hill, and it wasn't going to impact us, and it didn't impact us, thank goodness. And I kind of just was in my box that day, just looking after ourselves and looking after the girls in the rain. And my wife was the one that brought it to my attention. She got a message off a friend, and yeah, it kind of kicked into action then. We searched around for some info, found out how fucking bad it really was, and kicked into gear. I called one of my mates who's a professional fisherman, and he got his boat out of the river, and we took off to Lismore and got to work.
What were the scenes like? Like, I seen some of the videos, just raging waters everywhere. Like, that would have been gnarly, man. Like, scary as well.
Mate, I wasn't scared throughout it, but again, that was just conditioning through things that I've done before and training. But absolutely shocked with what I saw. Nothing can prepare you for that. Lismore is not my hometown, but we spend a lot of time there. It's only 20 minutes away from where we live, and to see it from a boat at roof level, and just you know the streets you're driving on, but you're cutting power lines to get through. That really didn't mess with my head, but took my head a long time to get around that in the day.
It would have been a traumatic experience, especially, like, I'm not sure if you came across any bodies or dead animals or anything like that, but that would have been a very traumatic experience for you and everyone else involved.
Yeah, mate, we didn't come across any bodies. We had some really close calls with some people, but we got them out, which was great. Dead animals everywhere. It was just mind-blowing, just won't get too graphic into it, but just animals floating down the street. Our engine broke down, and we kind of wedged ourselves up onto a bloated cow, so we'd stop floating at the time. And just one of those moments where you just look at what you're doing and you can't believe, and it takes a long time to integrate that and work through it and become okay with having those visions in your head.
Wasteland, essentially. And how do you're in that position, but how do you choose who to go and save or what to save?
We had a really good system. So again, just from my background, before I left home, I set my wife up with like a little command center. I had the laptop up. She started tracking my phone. I gave her some websites that would help her to get information. And it ended up being completely run by social media. So people who were sitting on their roofs or stuck in their roof cavity in Lismore and all around the Northern Rivers, they couldn't get through to 000, or they had got through like 8 hours or 10 hours before and no one had turned up. So they were putting their information on social media, where they were, what their address was, how many people were stuck. And my wife was getting that information and putting it into a database and then calling us and giving us the locations, and she could track our phone and tell us how far we were and tell us what their names were. And it was an incredible system, because when we picked up those people, I could call her straight away and tell them, yep, they're fine, we're dropping them here. And then she could let their next of kin know. Sometimes she'd had a phone call from a mother or a sister or a brother. So in terms of that, it was an incredible system that we had, and it was completely civilian run, which I'm kind of proud of that.
The power of community, eh? When we all band together, as humans, we can achieve so much.
Yeah, though that month that we had two devastating floods in, I've never seen a community pull together the way that we did up here. And yeah, it's given light to a whole new way of living up here, that's for sure.
What's it like there now? Is it still a wasteland? How long do you reckon it's going to take to recover from all this?
Um, it's going to take years, mate. It's and we're not going to recover in the sense of go back to where we were. Lismore, especially, so much of the CBD is devastated. I just can't see us as humans rebuilding that. I don't know what's going to happen, to be honest. A lot of it, it's probably an apt term, wasteland. A lot of the areas up here that were taken over by humans have become a wasteland. We're still talking thousands and thousands of houses that aren't livable, and in a lot of cases people still living in them because there's nowhere else to go. Your guess is as good as mine, though, how long it's going to take, mate.
Is there a lot of help, financial help from government or people coming in and helping rebuild it all, or is it just community kind of has to do it themselves?
Yeah, community, mate. We're still got, there's still community hubs running. So community hubs are just a group of locals who probably weren't affected. Sometimes they were affected and just stood up anyway. And they just open a community space where people can donate clothes, food, water, whatever. And anyone that's impacted can come and get it for free. And we've still got cases where some of those community hubs, they're in council or government buildings and they're paying rent to the council or to the government. So we're fundraising for that and trying to get cash to pay their rent for them. So things like that are still blowing my mind. And in terms of, federal government support and state government support, there's grants out there, but it's few and far between the stories you hear or your friends or your family who have access to those grants. So a lot of it's still community led, mate.
We could probably do a whole podcast just on this. It's crazy, and it's a very sticky situation, especially when the government's involved, and how it all went down, how it all played out. It's crazy. And to give a bit of context, how high did the water actually go?
So the level of the water, I think, was about 15.4 meters on the river. So when we were driving our boat around the CBD and around, I suppose you'd call it suburbia, where the houses are, and we had a sounder on that. Sometimes we're around 6 meters deep, other times around 4 meters deep. But just in general, you couldn't really see any windows on houses. It was all just roofs, and they're second-story houses. And when we were driving our boat, we were either ducking our head to get under the power lines because we're up that high, or people had bolt cutters and we just cut the power lines down because they were in our way. So when you're down the street and you look up, have a look at the power lines, that's where the boats were.
Shit. That is crazy, man. So were you just going around to each house, kind of banging on the roof, seeing if anyone was in there?
Yeah, mate, that was probably the heaviest part. Is we got on the water about 10 o'clock and people had been on there since daybreak, and we were just plucking people off roofs. But then the weather got really hairy just after lunch. Civilian boats kind of called it a day because there was not many people left on the roofs, and the river was still rising. It was rushing. It was pretty hairy. But that's when we kind of realized, well, now we've got to start banging on roofs, because everyone that was able-bodied and could get on the roof did, but some people got stuck in their roof, or some people climbed into their roof, but the waters rose up and they couldn't get out of their roof. So plenty of stories of people just driving a boat and hearing banging on the roof and coming over and cutting the roof open and pulling people out through the roof. And unfortunately, there was just less boats on the water in the afternoon once we came to that realization. So
And there was this story I heard that you rescued this old lady from a roof, and luckily you heard her. Like, you banged right where she was.
yeah, mate. So that's when we were banging on the roof in the afternoon, and she was kind of she's a bit of a godsend, because we'd been banging on roofs at that point for about an hour, and we hadn't found anyone. And we banged on this roof, and we just heard this old lady yell out, and I just had this rush of adrenaline. And we had some police rescue guys on our boat at the time. They'd boarded our boat, and they basically just said, "We'll do whatever you do," because they had no plan. And they just jumped straight overboard and swam into this high window. And she had about a foot and a half left of air in her house. It's a double-story house, so she's on the second level, and she was floating, holding onto a bed. And she would have been there for maybe 15 hours, 16 hours by the time the water rose up that high. And we floated her out through the window. We found a floating bodyboard, and we put her on the bodyboard, lifted her into our boat, and got her back to the staging area. And that was one that my wife got us onto. My wife had been talking to her daughter, and my wife was able to call her daughter, and I was, when I got home, I called her daughter as well to have a chat. And yeah, it was very emotional, but she came through, Mary. She's a strong woman.
You may not take recognition for it, but what you did was truly incredible, man. So hats off to you.
Yeah, I'm still not comfortable with that, mate, but thank you. And look, I just represent a tiny proportion of how many civilian people up here just put their hand up and went to work, so huge community effort.
Yeah, it's amazing, because I remember hearing as well, like, people will find their own helicopters, their own boats, everything. Like, everyone was getting involved, and that is truly amazing to see from a community like that.
Yeah, I say quite often, these floods, they chose the worst spot in Australia to land because, especially, the last 5 years, we've had a lot of population growth and a lot of negatives to that as well. And, you've got to be a multi-millionaire to buy a bloody house up here at the moment. But what it did do is, we've got just enough people up here, and we've always been a vocal lot in the Northern Rivers, as a lot of New South Wales people know. And we've got just enough people up here now to make a bit of a ruckus about what happened, and we're able to take care of ourselves to an extent, because we had just enough people to get through. I think some incredible things came out of that, and a lot of Australia, I've been contacted from people all over Australia, and a lot of different countries in the world as well, saying we just cannot believe the community response up there to this disaster, and how good it's been, and kind of rivaled a government response, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up, because during the floods, you weren't quite getting heard. There was a story you went on to was a Sunrise, and they cut you off, and the government, the media were just cutting you off. They didn't want to really hear what was going on. How does that make you feel, knowing that the top dogs, the top people within this country don't really care?
Oh man, I was so pissed off at the time, and I couldn't be happier the way it played out, because I look back, and yeah, it was Sunrise, and they cut me off, and I could see them cutting me, and and she just said, "I'm so sorry, we've got more important news to cut to." And I was seeing red. I just had rage inside me. But I just think, well, how many people watch Sunrise? A couple of 100,000 maybe. And are they people of action? Probably not. And I put a video up on social media. At the time, I had like 120 followers. I'd got on social media 28 days before the flood hit. And I just put a message on Instagram, a little video, and that video eventually got circulated 3 million times. And you can't get that from Sunrise. And the people that would have watched that are the people that matter, the people who wanted to make action. And that's what happened. And it wasn't just me. So many people spread messages that that caught on around Australia and around the world. And that's really how the response to this was led, just through social media.
The power of social media. And what was the responses that you got off the back of that? Like people just wanting to donate, send clothes, come up and actually help?
Yeah, so many offers of help. It's, mate, and again, I'm not blowing smoke up my own ass here, but my messages went so crazy that, and I've only got Instagram, I don't have anything else, but Instagram only allows you to have 99 unread messages in your message request box. And still at the moment, I'm sitting on 99. I can't get it down. I'm still going down. Maybe a couple of times a week, I'll sit down and just go through them and reply to these people, because some of the offers dating back to when the floods first hit are things like, I own a construction company and I've got 50 blokes. I'll send them up wherever you want. Or I've got earth moving equipment. We're coming down from Brisbane. All these things, just incredible. And then on the top of that, I think the response was, we were able to really pick the interest of people who I suppose should have picked up the ball earlier. So I ended up getting what I think the government should be doing and where do we need resources. And I ended up having a pretty close relationship just in working with the recovery with the Deputy Police Commissioner of New South Wales, again, because he didn't have many contacts on the ground. And so I think through that social media response, we really got some attention of the people who probably should have stepped up earlier.
Definitely. And how did it personally affect you, especially like off the back of it? You know, you've done rescuing people, but how do you personally handle it now? Did it have a mental toll on you?
It had a massive toll on me, but initially I just reverted to how I was trained and how I'd operated for a good 15 years in what I used to do. And I literally worked myself to the absolute bone in terms of fatiguing my adrenals and just running on adrenaline all day, every day. You know, leaving at sunrise, not coming home till 10:30, 11, and then, you know, doing what type of admin you do in a disaster, and, you know, looking at messages and text messages and things that you got throughout the day from people you connected with. And I did that for a good 2.5 weeks. And then I just crumbled. I was a complete mess. Luckily, if this happened 10 years ago, I'd probably still be in that mess. But luckily, with my beautiful wife, she's a naturopath. We've both grown together. We work on ourselves quite a bit. I kind of knew to an extent what I needed to do. And I seeked out some people that really helped me to bring myself out of that. I kind of worked on myself mentally and energetically first, and got that right before I really worked on nourishing my physical body again, which was kind of step 2 in that process.
That is so important that you actually had the self-awareness to realize, hey, like, I need to work on myself here. I need to take a little break to basically press that reset button and work on me, because so many people, and I'll say so many men as well, shit gets hard, we get faced with obstacles, we have trauma, adversity, but we just bottle it up and we're not talking about it. And then it just puts us in a darker and darker hole. And sadly, it sometimes can get to the point of masking that with drugs, alcohol, suicide. But it's awesome to see people like yourself are having the awareness to work on you, and you're also pushing that message as well.
Yeah, it's been a few months of that process too. It's not a quick process, you know. I've tried a lot of things in my life for self-growth and self-help, and even just maintenance, you know, just keeping a happy, healthy body. And I'm still really in the maintenance mode yet. I'm still mopping up myself from that flood. But what's on that mental health side, what's really flourished since those floods is the people I connected with during those floods. You know instantly that they're lifelong friends. We've been through hell together from the minute we met each other. For whatever reason, we came together in those floods. I feel like those people in my life, some I see, you know, weekly now, and some I haven't seen since, but even those ones I haven't seen since, the next time I see them, it'll be like nothing's changed. There's nothing to question about those friendships, and that's something that I really cherish. And the other part of that is I've found little crews of people now who, you know, I used to spend a lot of time in life sussing out my people, my tribe, and analyzing things. And since the floods, I've just kind of gravitated towards people and really embraced that. And the reason I'm spending time with them is because they've just presented in my life at the right time, and I'm going with that flow. And it's a beautiful way to live. Hey.
Exactly. People come into your life for a reason and at a certain time. We don't know why, but just, you just got to go with the flow. And adversity, obstacles, if you go through that with someone, it definitely strengthens that bond and brings you closer to that person.
Yeah. It's kind of like you've done 5 years together after a week.
Yeah. And I wanted to ask, on your personal development tools, like what else do you incorporate in your day-to-day life to really work on your mental health, as well as, your breathwork and your meditation?
Yeah, so you got to have passion. Say, a lot of my passions revolve around the ocean. Kids in the baby stage, which we've just come out of, it really pushes those passions to the limit. How much can you let go of those passions for a period of time? And I'm just coming back to those now, and it's beautiful. I used to drive around searching for the best waves for an hour for a surf and get frustrated if I didn't have a good surf. And now I don't give a shit what the ocean's serving me up. I could just paddle out in the sloppiest waves ever and have the best time and get that kind of self-meditation there from the ocean. I still do a bit of fishing. One big thing I've done since the floods is I've hooked up with a group of absolute legends up here, a little town called Lennox Head. They're called the Boaty Boys. They just meet up at a boat channel on the beach there 3 days a week, and they train together. And it's really centered around just having a good time, getting a bit of a sweat on, and just talking about shit if you need to. And I've seen your Grateful Club, mate, which I love that idea. It's so good. And I see a lot of that in what we do at the Boaty Boys as well. It's just a group of men just trying to change that narrative on what it is to be a man, and especially an alpha male. Our perception of alpha male is so wrong in our society. An alpha male is the one that can deal with his emotions and put his feelings into words and freely express those and say sorry and all those things that we've shied away from. So that's something I'm really enjoying for my mental health too, mate, being a part of that crew.
Well, if you want to be a part of the Grateful Club, mate, you're welcome. I'll add you in for sure.
I'd love to.
And if anyone else is listening wants to join, just send me a message and I'll add you into it. Benny, we have a closing tradition on this show where the previous guests ask the next guest a question. And the question today is, why are you alive? So what is your purpose? And what emotions do you want to feel before you die? It's a pretty deep one.
Oh, yeah. What is my purpose and what emotions do I want to feel?
Yeah, what emotions do you want to feel before you die? That is deep.
That is deep. Yeah. Mate, my purpose is to, first of all, grow into the human being of my full potential, whatever that is. Whatever my potential has been mapped out for me, I want to fulfill that potential. And I suppose I just want to let my life guide me there as well. And on the second part of that question, more of the same. Like, what emotions do I want to feel before I die? Fuck, all of them, man. I don't want to die having not experienced something that I could be potentially aware that I could have experienced. So I don't think at all that I've experienced or touched on a fraction of the emotions that you can experience in life. So fuck, bring it all on, mate.
Awesome. Benny, I've really enjoyed this chat. Even though we've had pretty poor internet connection, we got it done, man. And for all the listeners, where's the best place they can find you and support what you're doing?
Mate, all I have is just an Instagram account. Jump on and have a look, and you don't even have to attend a workshop. You can just you can seek this out for yourself if you want. And you can just check my Instagram for little pointers and see how fun it can be.
Awesome, Benny. I appreciate you. It's been awesome chatting. For the listeners, if you got some value out of today's episode, please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Take a screenshot of you listening to the podcast and put it up on your social media. Tag myself and Benny. We'd love to see you guys listening. And if you have any questions for Benny, as he said, reach out to him, see what he's all about. You'll get so much value from the work that he's doing. And we'll see you guys in the next episode. Cheers.